right, we made it. I've been using Crossbeam a lot lately.
I love it. Love to hear it. This is such a fun business because of the free tier. In my past companies, the companies got pretty big, but we had, a couple hundred customers maybe. And there's like 13,000 companies on Crossbeam. And it's just like so much more fun because like the probability that someone I meet is using the platform in some capacity is just like, higher and higher with every year. And it just makes every interaction a little more cross-beamy. I love it.
That's cool. 13,000, man.
It's wild. It's got a mind of its own. It's it's kind of like LinkedIn for data. So you get all these really neat network effects where as soon as it starts working for somebody, the next thing they do is invite all their partners to join. And if they're not already on it, they connect. So there's this really cool ripple effect that's almost consumery in nature, even though it's a B2B product.
Love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so natural. You get invited as a teammate, you immediately want to add other people. And then you naturally are like, oh, wait, there's 4 other partners that we don't have hooked up yet. That's like more viral than any SaaS product I've seen.
I love it. I love to hear it. It is. It's the most fun I've had building a SaaS product for sure, because of that exact thing. Right? It's, you don't see it too much.
All right, I'm going to see how many people are joining here. Kyle, you have some little ones as well? It seemed like you knew a lot about drawing Elmo.
No. I've got 2 dogs, and that is enough. No kids yet.
Nice. I'm with you. I can't see the full audience here. We'll get started in 1 second. All right, I think we should get started. I see a bunch of people trickling in. Cool. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Looks like we're seeing people continue to trickle in here. Really solid group. Thank you, everyone, for joining today's session on how leading revenue leaders are thinking about building high-quality pipeline. We have 2 really incredible speakers that I'm excited to introduce everyone to. What I think is really unique about this is both of them not only think about revenue for their organization all the time, they're thinking and talking to revenue leaders as customers, right? So a unique opportunity to probably have, hundreds, if not thousands of conversations a year with people that are thinking about this nonstop. So from a housekeeping perspective, we have a chat with everyone here. Please use it. I want this to be engaging. I told Bob and Kyle that we'd have some questions for them, and feel free to field some of them. So feel free to drop them in the Q&A section so they don't get lost in the overall chat. With that, let's dive in. So everyone could get to know everyone a little bit. I saw a mix of ICs, sales leadership, partnership people, RevOps, demand gen, et cetera, all coming here, which is great. I think we'll have relevant nuggets for everyone. I'll kick us off with an intro myself, and Bob and Kyle asked you to do the same thing, then we'll hop in. So for people that don't know me, my name's Todd Bustler. I'm the founder and CEO of Champify. I'm really excited to be here with you. I appreciate you all taking an hour out of your busy days. I'll pass it over to you, Bob.
Hey everybody, Bob Moore. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Crossbeam. Crossbeam you can think of as almost like an escrow service for data. So we help companies that are partnering with each other figure out where and how their data intersects and how to use that to grow faster. So we're usually helping people answer questions like, hey, I have a tech partner. How many customers do we have in common and who are they? Or I have a channel partner. Are my sales reps currently trying to sell to any of the same companies that their sales reps are trying to sell to? Basically, we kind of do this Venn diagramming between your CRM and the CRMs in your partner ecosystem. And this whole awesome ecosystem-led growth playbook comes out of it where you can co-sell and cross-sell and build on top of that information. So we've been around for about 4 years. And prior to that, I co-founded 2 other SaaS companies, RJ Metrics and Stitch Data, that were acquired by Adobe and Talent, respectively. So lots of data nerding over the last 15 years or so.
Nice. I'm Kyle Coleman. I lead the marketing team here at Clari. And before I introduce myself, happy International Women's Day to everybody. Just wanted to say that on this grand day. I lead the marketing team. Clari, for those of you who don't know, is a revenue platform. It's the only platform that is purpose-built to run revenue. All things from conversational intelligence to forecasting, sales analytics, mutual action plans, deal inspection, all the rest, all in one tidy package. So there you have it.
Love that. Bob and Kyle, again, thanks. Really excited to dive into this. So the title of this webinar is Shifting Focus, right? Much like yourselves, I talk to revenue leaders multiple every single day. And we hear a lot of companies shifting focus in 2023, really for 2 main reasons. The new market environment rewarding kind of efficiency. And also that, what got you to your previous milestone might not get you to your new milestone. So I'll start with you, Bob. Both of you have been at companies, for a long time, 3, 4, 5 years or through inception. How is your approach to pipeline generation different today, Bob, maybe than 2, 3 years ago?
Yeah, it's really, this is such a fascinating question because when you think about companies of this vintage, right, that were started in maybe the mid-teens or as late as 2018 or 2019, you have a lot of things going on at once. You obviously have what has happened in the macroeconomic environment, kind of the boom and bust cycle of abundant capital. You've also got COVID, which has had a pretty profound impact on how work gets done and how teams get brought together and, what productive outputs look like, right? Like there was a wave of time there that was a really crucial moment in the evolution of a lot of these companies where your classic sales boiler room wasn't just hard to do, it was literally illegal, right? In a lot of the cities where it might have traditionally existed. So a lot of the methodologies even around pipeline generation from an outbound perspective hit. And then you layer on top of that, like, you look at what has happened with the limitations placed on advertising through things like GDPR and CCPA, and the impact of even what Apple has done around limiting, kind of cookie sharing and identity resolution across applications on mobile devices. It's really, really decimated a lot of these traditional channels through which lead gen happens, right? If you can't have a SDR boiler room and that data gets commoditized and, you can't buy ads that are targeted extremely well, a lot of these traditional scalable growth channels start to become compromised. And it forces companies to look through other lenses in order to find ways to grow. So for us, there's been, a couple of really straightforward answers to that question. One of them is product-led growth, and, trying to build and incorporate mechanisms into our own product that actually perpetuate the usage of that product. And we've had to be creative about, how we do pricing and packaging and how we think about the customer journey and the buyer journey as kind of these intertwined but distinct things that happen within our product. But it's allowed us to really use PLG as the main growth engine for not just the users of our core product, but also our sales pipeline, and how we identify and qualify what constitutes a product qualified lead, right? And then the other playbook that we've used extensively is just drinking our own champagne and using Crossbeam itself to surface data from our partner ecosystem about how and where we are a very highly qualified fit for companies to potentially buy us. And honestly, we're customers of Clari as well, right? And We weave in the Crossbeam data into Clari, right, to help us inform like what's likely to close in the sales pipeline and at what rates and whatnot. And the really cool thing about infusing that ecosystem data in is that you can see right there the incredible lift that exists when someone you're selling to already uses a tech partners product, right, or is already kind of in the ecosystem data graph where you've got access to information or relationships that can push it forward. So I could go on any of those dimensions, but I'll hit pause there because it's the one wrap up thing I'll say is just, if I rewind the clock to 2016, when I was scaling go-to-market for my first company, there's not a single thing that we did at that company that we're still doing at Crossbeam. Like the radical transformational change that has happened in how companies develop pipeline and go-to-market is unbelievable in a less than 10-year period.
And Bob, was Crossbeam PLG focused from day one, or did that come out of kind of some early findings that you had and kind of reactions to new things you had to do?
Yeah, it kind of depends on your definition of PLG. So we had these viral hooks in the product the whole way through. So from day zero, we had this idea that part of what's appealing about Crossbeam is for us as business builders is that using it leads to other people becoming aware of it and building, their own networks on top of it. So almost like LinkedIn for data was kind of one of the early buzzwords we said, right? LinkedIn's more valuable if all your contacts are on there. And if you get on there and you find out one's not, what do? You send them an invite, right? So from day one, we facilitated that. I think what we did not focus on really heavily in, call it, years 0 through 2 is how to actually translate that into the monetization journey or the buyer journey for those users. So we had a very aggressive, very liberal free tier, which frankly we still do. Our free tier is absolutely awesome, and we still give a lot away, and that's very deliberate. But we really built the North Star metrics of the company in the first few years around how do we actually get those viral mechanics going in a way that they will self-perpetuate and self-scale, so that will then ultimately be the growth engine that feeds the economic side of the business. And, it's just so happened that in the last year or so, the most recent year, not only have we been able to start connecting those dots and have a more focused PLG path to dollars, but the market has also kind of demanded that, right? I think the conditions that allowed us to give so much away in 2020 and 2021 were directly linked to the abundance of capital, right? And kind of the ability to set North Star goals that weren't always revenue or profitability related. So a bit of lucky timing there. But I think even if it wasn't that lucky timing, we'd kind of be forced into that world anyway right now, as many companies are.
Yeah, makes all the sense in the world. Kyle, what about you? How's the approach to pipeline changed from your early days at Clari to today?
Yeah, it's very similar to what Bob said. The things that were working 5-10 years ago, just you have to reinvent the playbook here. And I think I can speak from a marketing lens and then also through the kind of outbound sales lens as well. From a marketing standpoint, the main kind of from to journey that I've seen is 10 years ago, we would, from a marketing standpoint, we'd be marketing our product, our technology, our capabilities, our features and benefits. And that went a long way. The market was less crowded. It was easier to get our messaging across. It was easier to be differentiated with that kind of messaging. Fast forward to today, we are hyper-focused, not on marketing. This is going to sound kind of strange, but we're not marketing our technology as much as we are evangelizing the problem that we solve. There is no enterprise-wide solution purpose-built to run revenue. You're using spreadsheets, BI tools, CRM, and you're lost, and you don't actually know what's happening. That is a major problem, without mentioning that Clari is a solution. And what we're trying to do here is we're trying to educate the market about a better way without putting on the higher pressure kind of on the nose tactics of, and that better way is Clari all the time. So we're very intentional about creating more thought leadership, more forums for conversations like this that have to do more about just general best practices. How are leaders thinking about running revenue? And then when somebody is in the market for a solution, they come to us first, because we are the ones that are beating the drum the loudest, that understand their pain points the loudest. And so we are the natural solution. So that it's a pretty big reframe. And again, it's unnatural for a lot of marketing people to focus so much on educating the market about the problem, but that's a big shift that we've made. And that's across everything that we do from a marketing standpoint, events, podcasts, thought leadership content, social, the rest. But it's also the way that our outbound team is focused. Our outbound team is hyper focused on really understanding the day-to-day problems of the personas that they reach out to, the quarterly focus areas, the strategic growth initiatives, all the different things that really matter more to the company that we're selling to and to the person that we're selling to. So it's not so much about, hey, this is what we do, check it out, we're so great. It's more about, we understand what you're going through, and when the time is right, we're here for you. So that's a shift in focus that has been sort of happening over the last 5 or 10 years. To be more pointed about sort of the macro conditions now, the way that I think about outbound prospecting in particular, but this is true for account-based marketing and a lot of other marketing efforts, is you want to focus on the center of the bullseye. And far too many companies see the whole target and they're like, wow, there's our total addressable market. Let's go and sell to every single one of those companies. And it's just not possible. So focus on the center of the bullseye first, and then you can focus on the concentric rings. And in that center of the bullseye, especially now with the macro headwinds, you can slice and dice that target account list even smaller, by industry, by segment, by geo. Which of your target customers are experiencing a tailwind right now instead of a headwind? For example, during COVID, Zoom, video, conferencing, all sorts of remote work things, major tailwind. It would have been foolish to not focus on those companies because they were growing like a weed. There's similar sorts of things happening now. If you're smart about looking and kind of hyper targeting your account list, you can shift your focus to create the messaging, create the value props, evangelize the problems that matter most to the subsets of companies that you're targeting, so that you have much better resonance and so that you have actual pipeline that's going to move through the funnel. Not just creating a first meeting, but creating high velocity pipeline that actually has a shot to close. So there's a million different ways that you can kind of think more granularly. And Bob, you mentioned this, I mention this all the time. We're so obsessed as revenue leaders thinking about scale. Like, how are we going to do this at scale? How are we going to do this for 10,000, 100,000 customers? That's not the way to think right now. You need to go all the way down to the kind of micro units that make up your sales addressable market. And you need to say, hey, this messaging may only be right for 5 accounts. Fine, write it. Take the time to do those things and make sure that you are creating the right sorts of messaging, value props, and again, the pain points that you're evangelizing that have the most resonance with that hyper targeted way that you're going to market.
I love that on the kind of refocusing the ICP. I think we can all, as SaaS companies and startups, learn a lot from Salesforce earnings. Like, they're kind of a canary in the coal mine in a lot of way. Yeah. And you saw them talk about financial services and tech way down from a net expansion standpoint, but like travel way up, right? And there's all components of that people can learn from. And I think, Kyle, many people are like, well, that won't scale. Whereas someone even at Clari scale is saying, hey, look, 5 accounts has a compelling story. Let's go tell that story. I think is awesome to hear. For people that don't know, Kyle built the SDR org at Looker before doing, I believe, the same thing at Clari and eventually kind of overseeing all of marketing. How do you think, you said something, take it out of quotes, what you just said was like, with a better shot to close. So right now with, a lot of our customers, a lot of companies we speak with, either seeing velocity slowing down or meeting the opportunity conversion slipping a bit. How do you think about the quality of pipeline and not just quantity? What goes into that for you at Clari?
There's a whole host of things that go into it, Todd. And a lot of it has to do with the way that we're not just targeting accounts, but then how we're prioritizing the accounts that we're targeting. And I'll use this word a lot, and I think it's really important in 2023. And the word is intent. There has to be intent. There has to be rationale. You have to have a reason for choosing to reach out to a company or a subset of the companies that make up your territory, that make up your account list. If you're not intentional about it and you're just like, I have 50 companies in my patch, sort them alphabetically, see what happens. Like, you're not doing your job. You have to think more critically about the things that we just talked about. Do you have companies that are cybersecurity companies, as an example, that are experiencing, typically they're a little bit recession proof. And maybe you want to start with that subset of companies and see what you can do to get some higher velocity pipeline from companies that just aren't slowing down right now. Versus, I don't necessarily want to be selling into the professional services company that just cut 30% of its staff. It doesn't make sense. So you have to be smart about what's going on in the macro. You have to be smart about why you're reaching out and when you're reaching out and what you say. And again, I know I'm going to sound like a broken record, but using an excuse that quote unquote, it won't scale, it is just an excuse. Like you can't expect everything to scale. And if you do, then you're going to fail. It's just kind of a nature of the beast. And in fact, I think that something not scaling is more of a reason to do it, because it means that fewer people will probably be doing it. If it's harder to do, there's just less noise. And so think and act with intent. Try and understand which accounts, which industries have some sort of tailwind. And then the final thing I'll say, Todd, is you really have to understand a company's strategic initiatives. They are going to buy Clari to help them run revenue, not because they want to improve their forecasting process. Like, yeah, that's a nice side benefit, but they're buying Clari to improve their forecasting process so that they can expand internationally, or so that they can roll out a new product line and assess its performance, or they can undergo an M&A and make sure that their teams are standardized and operating the same way. There's some business priority, there's some initiative at the executive level that if you can connect your value prop to, if you can find those pain points and be the connective tissue that helps them see the better way and how you're going to actually help them achieve their longer term goals, that is what's going to break through the noise. And that's what's going to help you be successful. Now, does that scale? Not infinitely, but you'll start to do some pattern matching where you say, hey, you know what? We kind of sell against the same 5 or 10 strategic initiatives every time. Let's build out the messaging cadence for those things for the right executives, and let's make a play out of it. So behave with intent, do your research, be personalized, have resonance, and don't ever just, do blast for the sake of doing blast. It's not a recipe for success.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And I think, Bob said what worked 6-8 years ago, probably at your previous startup where, that those plays did work, just not today. And I think the people that are adapting the fastest are having the best results. Bob, you said something about decreased customer acquisition costs a few minutes ago. I think one thing you said is really interesting is almost the macro environment enabled your organization to maybe prioritize more free users or breadth without having to say, hey, go get revenue really quickly. Mm-hmm. Now that there is more of a demand for reduced customer acquisition costs, showing revenue, any big initiatives that your teams focus on in order to drive some of the customer acquisition costs down?
Yeah, I'd say some of the things we've done that honestly translate almost into just good fundamental 101 level sales hygiene have actually packed a pretty big punch in the last couple of quarters. So, one thing that I think has been a really key piece for us has just been getting really, really finely instrumented on the hygiene of our pipeline and just how real the deals that sit inside of our sales pipeline are from a likelihood to close standpoint, and kind of allowing that to be driven by a number of factors that have proven to be extremely high confidence predictors of closing in the past, right? So for us, because we do have a product-led growth offering, what ends up happening is that one of the two dimensions there is just a product qualified account score, right? It's a quantification of certain actions taken in the product related to things like how many users, how much data is connected. In our case, you connect with partners on Crossbeam. So how many partners are you connecting with? All of these things kind of add up to a certain, signal score. But then there's a secondary dimension that's actually even easier to get at, which is just a fit score driven by firmographic data, right? So, there are simple things around how large a company's employee base is, or what vertical they're in, or potentially how rapidly their team is growing, or if they've fundraised within some recent time horizon that can actually also prove to be somewhat reliably predictive. So we kind of have this 2x2 matrix, right, of a fit score and a PQA score. And you have to rank within certain percentiles on both of those scores to make it into our true product qualified account pipeline. And the reason I bring this up as a way of bringing the cost of acquiring customers down is that the most expensive thing in our business about acquiring customers is paying sales reps. And how much quota coverage can they actually have? How efficient does their time get used? What amount of time is required for a new rep to ramp when they show up in the door. This isn't a business where we're spending millions of dollars on Google ads, or, we have a massive warehouse full of SDRs making cold calls to generate leads. We invest in our product as our primary driver of pipeline, but there's a ton of noise. So the quality of the pipe ends up becoming how you win or lose when it comes from a CAC standpoint. And if you have your reps, throwing all their energy and attention at deals that are not really likely to materialize, even though they might score high on one dimension or another, that's going to be really wasteful, right? So this is where our VP of sales has done just a brilliant job, particularly in the past 2 or 3 quarters or so, with just this relentless focus on pipeline hygiene and pipeline qualification, so that we have a very, very predictable and tight band of close rates that exists within whatever we walk into the quarter with, and also a pretty good ability to predict, what kind of new bluebird activity might materialize and close within the quarter, right? So our precision with forecasting gross new sales has gotten pretty stellar, and it's a result of those efforts. And I think because of that, our reps are way more efficient. They can carry more quota, and your CAC goes down, and that's the magic formula.
I love that. Yeah, the FIT score, PQA score, basically what you're allowing them to do is focus in the right areas, and then also, like, you're spending a lot of dollars on active deals. Make sure they're on the ones that have the highest clip. Forecasting get better, efficiency get better, quotas can go up. Makes all the sense in the world. Kyle, next question for you, and feel free, to also mention maybe some of your customers or prospects that you've talked to, because I'm sure you're having a lot of these conversations. But I've seen revenue teams, due to things being harder, get more creative than ever and more resourceful. Anything that your team is doing in particularly new or novel, or any of the things that you've seen across your customers or prospects that you thought was unique?
What's so funny about this, Todd, is I've had a very similar conversation with a handful of revenue leaders recently, and the answer is super boring, which is like fundamentals, meat and potatoes, go back to basics, do the little things well. And so, there's no silver bullet. There's nothing magic formula that's just going to create a unbelievable amounts of pipeline overnight. It really is about doing really thorough account research, really understanding your personas, really understanding your own product and solution, really understanding the pain points that you can solve, and then effectively messaging against them, being multi-threaded in deals, like all these things that it's like sales process 101, revenue process 101. It's 101 for a reason. And so a lot of times people, they try and go too far the other way, where they're like, oh, we need some novelty here. We need something new. We need something exciting. We're going to spend $100,000 on direct mail and see if it works. And it's like, well, calm down. Like, are you doing the basics well? How confident are you in the value of your messaging? How confident are you in the resonance with the personas that you're reaching out to? How confident are you in your sales methodology, in your discovery skills, your qualification, the way that you're demoing? Are you listening to the calls and giving your reps feedback? Like, it's the not super glamorous stuff that makes the biggest difference. And so, it sounds like something of a boring answer, but it really does matter. If you are struggling right now, and many people are, it's totally normal, focus on the 101 and 201 type stuff. Don't feel like you need to go in and reinvent the wheel and come up with some new magic formula, go-to-market strategy that's going to immediately cure all that ails you. It's just not going to happen. So that, I'm sorry if that's disappointing for everybody, but that's the common thread from every single person that I talk to, is really focus on the fundamentals, really focus on the basics, make sure that you're controlling all the things that you can control. And then you can layer on some of the fancier stuff, some of the newer age stuff. Final thing I'll say on this front is I'm seeing, we saw start maybe back in 2010, there was not a ton of sales automation from a email, LinkedIn, calling standpoint. That automation spiked to out of control levels in the late teens and like 2020, 2021. And now I'm seeing it fall back down. I don't know if you two are seeing the same, but I'm seeing revenue leaders, SDR leaders, sales leaders, anybody who's outbounding, kind of ratcheting down their reliance on the sales engagement platforms of the world. We're kind of recalibrating their expectations for what output numbers should be from an SDR or from an A who's doing outbounding, and focus far more on quality over quantity. And that, to me, is a major trend in the right direction and jives, I believe, pretty nicely with the back to basics stuff.
Mhm.
You know, if you only had one account, and this is the mindset that we have, if you only had one account, how would you treat them? What would you do? And what would you do differently? And that mindset fundamentally changes the way that people think, because it's like, I don't need to send 300 emails every day. I need to send a dozen really good ones. I need to make a handful of really well researched cold calls, or whatever, warm calls, however you think about it, and just play the quality over quantity game. So I think those two things, those two trends I mentioned, are hand in glove, and I see more and more revenue teams adopting them.
Totally agree with that. I would add on, I remember the early days of kind of the movement around the cold outbound playbook, right? This guy, Aaron Ross, wrote a book called Predictable Revenue that was like, it was almost more like a pamphlet. And like, if you had gotten your hands on it in 2011, then you had like the keys to the kingdom, right? And it really was, Aaron came out of Salesforce, and it was born out of this idea that, hey, there is this really exciting, incredible, scalable new way to generate lead flow, which is that you basically, you build and scale a team that's doing, personalized, targeted, cold outbound outreach to prospects. And there was, for real, a moment in time in, kind of that 2011 to 2015 range where if you were doing that, it worked because it was so rare, because it was arbitrage, right? Like the first 10 or 20% of that market before the chasm got crossed, that figured out how to do that and do it well, and the SDRs that really nailed it, they generated a lot of pipeline because there was bandwidth available in people's inboxes, right, to receive that signal and actually interpret it and translate it into, hey, maybe I should have a conversation here. What happened then was the world noticed, and the other 80% picked it up, and a whole universe of software tooling got built around the automation and delivery of these things at scale. And it went from being kind of this shadowy secret formula that some folks had to like an extremely mainstream, like keeping up with the Joneses. Like if you're not running this strategy, you've done something wrong. And this is just like the definition of like a zero sum game in game theory, right? It's like, when 10% of the world is doing it, then you have this arbitrage thing going on. When everybody's doing it, the amount of attention that I can spend on my inbox is finite, but the amount of things that can be in my inbox is infinite. So as that ratio of like signal to noise gets driven out of whack by everyone on the planet doing this cold SDR thing, the efficacy of those things gets dropped proportionally. And that's like, I'd toss that right on the pile with everything I mentioned at the beginning of this conversation, right? Around like the efficacy of ads, the interference in the universe of privacy and, targeting. This cold outbound strategy has just fallen off a cliff from an efficacy standpoint. And it's hard to see a path to it recovering in any kind of meaningful way. And people are making up for it with higher volume. And that actually exacerbates the problem because it makes the noise part of that ratio even worse. So it's a challenging tactic that I think requires a lot more intelligence. And the winners end up being the ones who know how to specialize, personalize, and target. And to Kyle's point, right, go after the center of that bullseye rather than a spray and pray. It does get you back to a more deliberate strategy.
And by the way, Bob, like this is not just incumbent on the individual reps that are doing the outbound. This can and should be a shared collaborative go-to-market strategy across your partner team, your marketing team, your executive team. Every single person should play a role in this strategy. And that's the formula for success. It's not, the solo wolf out there trying to lone wolf their way to success. It really does require the interconnectedness across a whole go-to-market engine. So you have your partner ecosystem team softening the market. You have the marketing team providing that air cover, and then you are the ground troops that are going in. And that is the formula. That is the Venn diagram that leads to the overlap that leads to most success.
Yeah, totally agree.
Couldn't agree more with both of what you said. I think Bob, I was that rep in like 2014, 2015 that first got their hands on like Yesware and outreach. And I was like, whoa, look what this could, and it worked at that time. Like it really worked. And it was like, who was the nerdier person that knew how to send mail merges? And like that led to results. And we're definitely in a different time now. I think Kyle, I really feel what you just said there in terms of it used to be who's the hungriest rep, get them on the island, give them the right tooling. And now it's who's working with marketing, who's bringing in the Crossbeam data, who's bringing in the exec team, right? I think one thing, Kyle, you say go to the meat and potatoes, but I think Clari does so many of these things that companies don't do that I see as creative in terms of like what you're doing from a thought leadership standpoint with your CEO, with Devin Reed, with what you put out on LinkedIn, with stories and different offers for ways that people get involved, whether they want to come to an event, they want to do an analysis on what's happening in their pipeline. Like there's a lot of different ways. And I think people aren't thinking creatively enough about those offers or just ways to start to engage with your brand. So that's always stands out from Clari and something we look up to. You talk a lot about, Kyle, RevOps, right? The role, the growth of the role, the demand for the role. What are you seeing in terms of what role RevOps plays when it comes to pipe generation and kind of the predictions for the future of that role?
Oh man, this is, I'm going to do my best to not talk for the rest of the time here because the role that RevOps plays in this whole thing, the importance can't be overstated. I mean, from everything that starts with territory planning and account designations and quota setting and goal setting and all the rest, to partnering with finance to really understand what do pipeline coverage models need to be for different segments or industries or regions, and like goal setting, territory setting, and then accountability every single day. I speak with my VP of RevOps literally every single day, tracking all of the leading and lagging indicators that are indicative of success or failure for the goals that we've set. So RevOps plays a insanely important role in stitching all of this together and making sure that the company strategies are reflected in the go-to-market strategies and that we're all accountable and can track what we need to track to know if our contribution from marketing and what we call SDR, we call it Rev Dev, revenue development. If all of these things are happening, are supposed to be happening, are actually bearing fruit, and a lot of that, the keys to the castle, are owned by our revenue operations team. So they're the interconnective tissue among the entire go-to-market machine, and their importance, honestly, it can't be overstated. They have each, the way that our revenue operations team is structured is we have our VP of RevOps, and then he has a handful of direct reports, and each of those direct reports are embedded in different departments. So I work hand in hand with a guy named JB. Awesome. If you're watching, JB, you're the man. Our head of sales works very closely with a guy named Phil. Our post-sales team works with a guy named Parker. Like they have different lieutenants that are literally embedded on staff calls, making sure that they understand the business and can support the business however they need to, so that they're not surprised and that the leaders are getting the data, the insights, whatever it may be that they need to know what's working, what isn't, to be able to look retrospectively as to what happened, to know what's happening right now, and then to create that sort of predictive lens about what's going to happen. And that's the role that RevOps plays. And I'd be remiss if I didn't say that Clari, the platform, makes all of that significantly easier for revenue operations teams.
Yeah, definitely hearing more and more them being the center of the pie, the connective tissue, and like need to be embedded, not just this side team. Bob, I want to take a question from the chat. It says, does Bob believe every company has the potential to execute a viral tactic? For example, how would he suggest someone like Clari goes about that? Or how important was that to you even getting started with Crossbeam?
Yeah, this is my ability to geek out here is going to go pretty deep. So I'll try to keep it within reason. So if you look at this universe of virality as a growth mechanism, it's kind of a subset of a broader universe, which is network effects in general, right? So virality is an artifact of a network effect situation where, you know, one particular person adopting a product may increase the likelihood that someone else does it. You can have viral tactics that are artificially stimulated, right? If you think back to the early days of Dropbox, right? I don't know if you had an account in the early years, but you know, they give you like 100 megs of free storage And for every friend that you invited, they give you another 10 megs free forever, right? And that Dropbox is not a product, at least at that time, that had any network effects to it. It's not like it was used back then for sharing files in a widespread way or across enterprise teams. It was an individual personal storage and backup solution that was just kind of throwing your files onto S3. But they created a viral mechanic by having some kind of incentive system that allowed their users to bring people onto the product and rewarding them for it over the long term. Any company can do that kind of thing, right? And there are ones where it makes more sense. And usually when you have a metered thing that you are delivering that you can give an incremental amount of in exchange for some kind of viral behavior, that's ideal. It's a little harder when you're selling a, all or nothing, hey, buy this for 50 grand enterprise product, right? But there are also other flavors of kind of network effect artifacts that you can find that don't always necessarily even need to exist across company lines. And the best example of that in B2B software is actually within a company creating viral effects that lead to more users getting added, right? A lot of businesses, user seats are a metric that's correlated to revenue. And even if, you don't necessarily get your next wholesale brand new lead from a viral behavior, what you can do is get the next seat inside of one of your accounts, or the next 10 seats be driven by some hooks that you have inside of the product. And that might be as simple as just being able to ask the question in the right moment. It might be building out feature functionality where, if you've got a part of your product that lets you build a report, you'd be amazed how making those reports shareable and just having a prompt there, like which of your teammates should have access to that, will lead to people just inviting a wave of new teammates that they don't have seats, right? So they just kind of send invites in. All of these are kind of, standard issue PLG style tactics that in a consumer application might lead, hey, invite your friends. But in a B2B context, it's, hey, invite your coworkers. And that can be correlated to revenue too. So there's actually a great book called The Cold Start Problem, written by Andrew Chen, who's a partner at Andreessen Horowitz, that digs into a lot of this nuance, right, around network effects and virality and, their impact on growing businesses. It's got a bit of a consumer skew, but there's some cool B2B examples in there too. And that's some further reading for anybody that wants to go deep on the subject.
Love that. I think there is an opportunity in a variety of different products, and some people write it off too early of like, oh, I don't have that virality, or I don't price on seats, it's not important. But there are creative ways in every one of these products. I think, and a lot of people have challenged us to think about that as well. So I'd love to hear the way you think about it, Bob. I'm going to combine one question from the chat and one I had for you, Bob, is how are partnerships playing a role in driving pipeline, maybe in some less obvious ways? And then maybe I'll just piggyback that with a question in terms of how do you think about some of the complexity around measuring the success of some of those pipeline programs, sourced, influenced, fulfilled? Love to get your take on that. I know it's a big question.
Yeah, maybe I'll start with the second part, and that might lead to some examples that answer the first part. So this question of attribution in the partnership world, it leads to this thing that we have kind of coined in our content and in some of our surveying data that we call the partnership paradox, which is that partnership professionals have an overwhelming amount of conviction, like a bet my career level of conviction, that the ROI on partnership programs are absolutely enormous. The leads generated and the revenue impacted and driven as a result of the partner programs are through the roof. And yet partners are one of the most underinvested in areas inside of most companies. And even if I had a LinkedIn post about this a week or two ago, like if you look at who's getting hit hard in a lot of these layoffs, like partner teams are getting impacted in more cases than not in some kind of way. And it's all related to what you said, which is the challenge that exists in being able to actually tie what's going on inside of that broader ecosystem to the actual needle moving in the business itself. This is, at the risk of sounding like the most self-serving answer ever, this is literally why Crossbeam exists, right? Because the thing that we allow you to do that was never possible before is, if you think about this data layer that Crossbeam unlocks, right? It's really, let's understand what sits at the center of that Venn diagram between my sales pipeline and customer base and the sales pipelines and customer base of every single company that's out there in my partner ecosystem. So what does that allow you to do? there's a lot of action taking around ecosystem qualified lead generation and co-selling and cross-selling with partners, and the actual work that can get done to generate new deals, advance deals faster, get more intelligence that has the nuance of a real human relationship rather than just, buying a firmographic data set. But then on the backside of that, you get the measurement benefits. And this is where you kind of solve for the attribution problem. One of the things we have, some of our more sophisticated users doing is they use Crossbeam data to draw a really simple comparison, which is at the end of every quarter, they say, look, we closed, 112 deals last quarter. In 67 of those deals, the customer that we closed was already a customer of at least 2 other companies in our tech partner ecosystem. And let's look at category A versus category B. Those deals close at a 37% higher ACV. They close with a 3-week shorter sales cycle, and all of the kind of virtues and benefits that you want to see associated with deals in general, right? Win rates, right? That's the other one that's really big, especially in like competitive situations. Like competitive win rates are typically through the roof. And, you can ask this question of, okay, there's this direct and sourced and influence question around, you can literally source deals through your partner ecosystem. That's a real thing. And you can measure those as well. But even the analysis I just described, it puts some real meat on the bone around being able to say, this is a statistically significant, unquestionable correlation that exists between building out of an ecosystem and having more touches and more pathways to have one of my sales deals basically be like an in-ecosystem deal. And by doing that, there's a massive percentage, in most companies, it's greater than 50% of my pipeline that is buoyed in an enormous way in terms of the size of the deal, the rate at which it closes, and the speed with which it closes. And being able to quantify that and point to, hey, if all of these were out of ecosystem deals, we would have closed, $2 million less ARR last quarter, and it would have taken 6 more weeks to do. That's where you can start to really say something at a large level around the ROI of your ecosystem at large. And you start there. And then what you can do is drill down into the actual attribution mechanism that can exist on any individual deal. And that can be something that you do through manual tagging, which a lot of companies do. But there's also an increasing number of these integrations that we've got in Crossbeam where every single deal is like a timeline view, right? So you have all these events, like it overlapped with partner X, it overlapped with partner Y, became a customer of partner Z. But now we've got integrations with some folks that are coming up, that including Clari, by the way, where you actually get to know and observe signal that exists, which is like this sales rep accessed information from the partner ecosystem via Crossbeam about this account, right? Like there was a sales rep in the ecosystem data that was consuming it in the course of pursuing the account. We have a Sales Edge product where you can communicate with reps across company lines, right? When you're working the same account at the same time, the existence of that chatter, right? Another really great piece of signal. And even we're partnering with some of the leading providers of call recording software, and we can monitor when a partner's name gets mentioned on a sales call, right? And tag that and put it back into the timeline view that exists around a particular deal, and use that to attribute back to a partner. Like this attribution and ROI analysis stuff is really the name of the game in how this partner sales, co-selling, alignment stuff crosses the chasm, right, into more mainstream. And it's all happening right now in real time with these solutions like Crossbeam coming to market. Hopefully that answers questions A and B in some way.
Definitely does. And I know I saw Anne asking a question as RevOps leader. So I think that was exactly what she was looking for. To me, the partnership thing's a no-brainer. And I think what Crossbeam does is just make it super easy, and also makes it really easy to show the value to a lot of people that maybe don't believe it, like a lot, I do as a revenue leader at least. I'd like to give everyone a couple minutes back. So we're just about at time. I wanted to say first to Bob and Kyle, thank you so much. I appreciate it. You're both very busy people. I love talking about this. I love nerding out about it. I know the audience does as well. For people that want to reach me, I'm just Todd at champify.io. You can find me on LinkedIn. I think Bob and Kyle kind of talked about a lot of the problems we solve, which is just outbound's getting really hard. A lot of the traditional channels aren't working. For people like Kyle, and Bob that have built great products and marketed to the audience and onboarded tons of customers. What Champify does is try to make it really easy to tap into that audience over time. So if anyone wants to get a data test or dive into that, happy to. Quick, maybe 30 seconds, Kyle and Bob, where can people reach you? Where can they listen to you? How can they get in touch?
Yeah. So if you want to learn
go
more
ahead,
about,
Kyle. Take it away.
Sorry,
Go.
Clari.com, Clari.com. If you want to learn more about our revenue platform, we just relaunched our website. So give me any and all feedback, good or bad. I'd love to hear your take on whether we're getting our concepts across. And then if you're curious to connect with me on LinkedIn, please do. I'm just Kyle Coleman on LinkedIn. I try and post a handful of times per week on all things revenue and management and leadership and things like that. So thank you again for coming, and Todd and the Champify team. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. And I am Bob Moore on LinkedIn, and you can head over to crossbeam.com and get hooked up on the network. Join for free. You can be up and running in a couple minutes. Connect with your partners. That's where to find us.
Awesome. Bob and Kyle, thanks again. Everyone have a great Wednesday. Take care.
Cheers. Thanks all.